Hello and welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets this evening?
We have no regrets this evening.
Thank you. Let's keep it that way. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see no declarations of pecuniary interest. It would be in order now for two of us to move and second us into Committee of the Whole. Councilor Lischina and Councilor Chisholm, thank you very much. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the motion carries and we're resolved in Committee of the Whole with our relaxed rules to allow questioning of delegations and extra time. So, Council, the first thing I want to turn your attention to is the consent items. And they are five. I'm sorry. Let me just back up. What I have is three consent items, and one of them has been updated into a withdrawal because more work needs to be done. And so I'm looking for a motion for the three public consent items and the confidential consent item, which I believe is self-explanatory. Councillor Duddick, thank you very much for the motion. Is there an objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the confidential consent items are adopted as described in the public agenda. Now, that brings us to our first public hearing item. This is a public meeting for a draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment for Bronny River LP, and we have a presentation from Kate Coburn, our senior planner. And anyone watching who wishes to speak to the item can call 905-815-6095, and we will connect you to the meeting, and you'll be called upon to speak following the registered delegations. We only have one registered delegation, and that is an individual from Corsiac Urban Planning on behalf of the applicant. The purpose of this meeting is to identify issues that we want to make sure staff evaluate as they consider this application, as they come to a recommendation later. So the business of this part of the meeting is to identify issues, not to argue a case, if that is of any help to anybody. So, Council, if we give our attention to Kate, she will summarize the files that you've read and enable the public who may be watching to understand the matter. Ms. Coburn, it's, you have the floor and the Zoom because we're in hybrid now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It's good to be back in chambers for this meeting. As was mentioned, the application before you this evening is for a draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment, which have been submitted by Corsiac Urban Planning on behalf of their client, Bronte River LP. The proposal relates to the development of lands for low and medium density residential uses. And this report can be found as item 6.1 on tonight's agenda. And as mentioned, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to introduce the applications to council and the public and to obtain any further comments for the review as it is related to this application. The applicant had held a public information meeting on July 14th, 2021. And throughout the review process, this town has received 2 letters of objection for this proposal. As was mentioned, if there is anybody watching the live stream of the meeting at oakville.ca and they wish to speak to the item, they can call in at 905-815-6095 and they'll be connected and called upon to speak as a delegate. The property is located on the west side of Bronny Road, south of Upper Middle Road, and is comprised of 5 parcels. The subject lands are a part of a larger holding, which includes 2 additional lands to the north, making up an area known as Bronte Road West lands. These lands were included in the town's Merton planning study, and as a result of the Ontario Municipal Board hearing, they were subsequently designated for low-density residential, medium-density residential uses, natural area, green belt, and they have a parkway belt overlay with the site-specific exemption policies which are included in the official plan. The lands that are included within the Greenbelt Plan are mainly to the south, which is the woodlot area that you can see on the southern end of this plan. The applicant proposes to develop approximately 12 hectares of land with 39 detached residential units, and this includes an existing dwelling to remain in situ, and is shown in purple on the screen. This also includes a future condominium block for up to 96 townhouse units, and that block will also include one relocated heritage building, and that is the darker orange area that you see on the plan. The development would also include new municipal street and a new natural heritage system that would ultimately be conveyed to the town. The dark green area shown on the slide is the existing woodlot within the Greenbelt Plan area. In addition, a buffer area, which has somewhat been shown in the light green on the slide, will also be conveyed to the town through this application. However, staff have noted through the report that further refinement of this area is required, as the proposed lot in purple appears to conflict with the minimum buffer area and the future valley trail system. The applicant is required to complete the appropriate environmental studies to better determine the buffer limits, and these are still under review by Conservation Halton and the region. And I apologize for the orientation. We're going to flip up and down and side to side as we go based on the material that we've been given. The subject lands are designated as low density in the light yellow, medium density in the orange, natural heritage, or natural area rather, in the light green, and the lime green is the green belt. And there is a parkway belt overlay which is denoted in the stripes across. It has been discussed, however, that the Parkway Belt West Plan is actually no longer applicable for these lands. The owners have satisfactorily addressed the ministry's requirements, and these lands have been removed from the Parkway Belt West Plan. And the town will proceed with appropriate housekeeping amendments in the future to modify the schedules accordingly, but the underlying designations will apply to the development and this proposal. Through the development concept, which is provided in section 27.3.8 of the Livable Official Plan, the areas are designated for medium and low density uses, which are intended to be refined through comprehensive environmental and stormwater management studies. Areas outside of the developable area for the site will be conveyed back to the town as part of the natural heritage system. The property is currently zoned existing development, natural area, and greenbelt. The applicant is proposing zoning that would implement their proposed development while maintaining the greenbelt and natural zones. The applicant is also proposing modifications to an RL6 zone, an RM1 zone, and an RM2 zone. The range of modifications can be found in Appendix B of the staff report. The RL6 zone does permit detached dwelling, and the applicant proposes a variety of modifications related to setbacks, height, number of stories, and projections. Similarly, the applicant is proposing a variety of modifications to the RM1 and RM2 zones, which would permit townhouse dwelling units. Many of the zones' modifications appear to reflect zoning standards that are more typically found in the North Oakville area, and staff have identified concerns with respect to this approach. Further refinement of the proposed zoning bylaw is required and will be informed through the approval of the urban design brief and planning justification report, in addition to establishing an appropriate road network, stormwater management design, and addressing the natural heritage matters to ensure that the proposal implements the development concept and other applicable policies of the official plan. The next few slides will address the various matters that staff have outlined in the report to date with respect to matters to be addressed. They're quite detailed. There are a number of them. I'll try to paraphrase as best as possible in the interest of time. Alignment with the climate emergency declared by Council in June 2019, consistency with the applicable provincial and local policies, conformity with the Livable Oakville Plan, which includes the development concept outlined for the Bronte Road West lands and other applicable policies, coordination of the draft plan and zoning with future developments to the north, protection of the natural heritage system, finalizing the type, size, and location of stormwater management facilities and the appropriate outlets, the appropriateness of private roads for the development, design and alignment of the public roads and coordination of roadways, to ensure that the lands are efficiently and optimized use for the developable area, conformity with the applicable urban design guidelines and policies, conservation of existing cultural heritage resources, conveyance of the natural heritage system to the town, coordination of the top of bank trail system, the evaluation of on-street and visitor parking opportunities within the development, and the evaluation of the proposal with respects to Section 2 and Section 5124 of the Planning Act. All the comments together and raised through tonight's meeting will also be addressed as part of a future recommendation report. As the review of this application continues, resolution of these matters may result in modifications to the proposal as it proceeds. That concludes, almost concludes my presentation. The recommendation before council tonight are that the public meeting report be received, that any additional comments with respect to the application be received, and the council staff consider any additional comments provided by council. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Now, I note that we received some comments from the public, and I assume that you've already incorporated those in your issues. Madam Clerk, are there any delegations phoning in?
We do have Amber Lindsay, who is phoned in. If we can bring her forward.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Lindsay. You just need to unmute yourself, and the floor is yours. There you go.
Oh, hello there. Sorry about that. I'm new to this whole system. Am I free to speak now?
Yes, you are. We look forward to your information.
Thank you. So my name is Amber Lindsay. I am calling in on behalf of Eaglewood Communities, Inc. We are the landowner immediately adjacent to the Bronte River subdivision, proposed subdivision. We have subsequently or consequently filed planning applications, private planning applications separate from the Argos proposal that is being presented this evening. But I just wanted to call in this evening to indicate my support for the proposed applications and also to just speak to the general coordination that has been ongoing between ourselves as the adjacent landowners. You'll see on the draft plan, there's about a 0.05 hectare reserve block proposed, and that is something that would be coordinated with our future proposal or our proposed development that will be coming in a future neighborhood meeting. I believe Ms. Coburn mentioned this in the staff report or the report that went forward to council this evening, but like I said, I have no general comments on the application other than to just note my support.
Well, thank you very much for your information. Are there any members of council with questions for Ms. Lindsay? No? Thank you very much, Ms. Lindsay. And
thank you.
Madam Clerk, any others?
No, there are no others.
Well, then let's turn to council. We have Councillor Elgar, Councillor O'Meara, and Councillor Robertson. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Just trying to read through the report. I think just some clarification from staff, because when I look at the report, it says the applications were submitted and deemed complete on January the 6th, 2022. And then there's that bill provides 120 days, that bill 108. But if you go up a little bit further, you see that it wasn't allowed out of the Parkway bill until March the 22nd. And if you go back to the Parkway bill West plan from July of 1978, the property was actually for a buffer area. So nothing could be done until that was taken out of Parkway belt. So was the application complete in January the 6th based on the fact they didn't get it out of the Parkway belt until March the 24th, 2022 or March 22nd, and then it was filed on March the 24th of 2022. So from a timeline point of view, is everything right there? Like, can you please explain what a submitted and deemed complete means?
Okay. The question is the application complete?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, if I understood and heard correctly. Yes, there are 5 parcels that make up the total land holdings, and all but one parcel was removed from the Parkway Belt West in advance of the applications being submitted. There was an active application with the ministry at the time that the application was submitted, and that had been resolved prior to the staff report being brought forward to council this evening. It has been the staff's practice that given the ongoing discussions with the ministry at the time, staff had entertained the application submission and had deemed it complete. We did not require the lands to be removed from the Parkway Belt West in order to deem the application complete. We required various studies and reports and drawings to be submitted, knowing that that would be a requirement through the review of the application, that we could not move forward with a decision for council to consider without the lands being removed from the Parkway Belt West plan. I hope that helps answer the question.
Complete, you don't need to have it done. You can go on the assumption that it's going to be done. So that's how the time will work for everything. Is that the way that's the way it works? That's interesting. I thought I appreciate that, because I thought when they were submitted and deemed complete, it meant everything was in line and we could start the clock. But now you can start the clock before you have approval from the province on the Parkway Belt West plan.
Through you to the mayor, that is how we reviewed this particular application at the pre-consultation stage, which is the requirement before the formal application is submitted. And as these lands had already been designated for development through that previous Merton land study review, the expectation was that these lands would ultimately be removed from the Parkway Belt West plan. It's up to the applicant to make those applications and have that submitted. And at this time, there is no more Parkway Belt West plan applicable to these lands.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So things can move 3 months, not a problem. Okay, I thank you. That's a new twist I didn't know about, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. And Kate, thanks for the presentation. It's less of a question with particular to the site plan and the zoning, but I had a number of constituents reach out to me expressing their desire that we stop this development. We don't allow the west side of Bronte to be developed. We shouldn't be changing our official plan. I'm wondering if you might be able to just take a couple of minutes to explain that this is not an official plan amendment, and maybe what the difference is between a subdivision, plan of subdivision and a zoning bylaw amendment here, and how that fits out with what was then the OMB decision. I think there's still a lot of confusion, as there might always be forevermore, about how these things are decided upon. But with regards to our role right now in terms of whether homes get built on this property or not, could you maybe just pull the thread a little bit on that and just explain for everyone watching sort of what we're deciding now and what's already been approved?
Through the mayor to the councillor, if I can ask our support to pull the presentation back. And if we can pull to slide, let me see here. Oh, here, maybe I can just, how do I go back? I know. Left arrow? No, that finishes it. Oh, there it goes. Oops, sorry. Oh, thank you. There, I think they're still trying to pull it up for me here. See, if I were at home, it would have been okay. All right, let's just try this again, just to pull up the presentation. Okay, excellent. There we go. Okay. Again, through to the mayor, to the councillor, this is an image of the official plan schedule. So these are the land use designations that we have within the schedule. You will notice that there is a dotted line kind of north of the lime green color, and that dotted line would extend even more so towards the orange. So that dotted line is the area that is part of the Bronte Road West lands that were part of the Merton study at the time, that the Ontario Municipal Board, former Ontario Municipal Board, had determined through that process that these lands could accommodate some form of development. And these lines that we're seeing, the various colors, were sketched out through that process to delineate an area where we would see detached houses and where we might see townhouses or low-rise apartment buildings within that medium-density residential designation. The other areas in green also denoted the areas that were likely to be conveyed back to the town through that process. So the zoning bylaw amendment, which will apply the nature of those uses, implements that direction of the official plan. And similarly, the subdivision or draft plan of subdivision application is further implementing that objective to carve out the lands in an efficient way that will provide for new development opportunities within this area. So the application is not for an official plan amendment. None of these boundaries are expected to change. In fact, through the comprehensive environmental studies and the stormwater management review, it is possible that some of these areas might actually be further refined, and these areas, the developable area, the orange and the light yellow, might actually be further reduced based on what would be determined as the official natural area on that basis. So that is the general framework. For a better history on what happened within the Merton Land Study to the councillor, I can definitely provide you with links that you can share with your constituency. They can review that material on our website, and that is still available.
That's great, Kate. I think it's just important to note that, you know, the game has been called and the rules have been set. We're just trying to figure out where the pieces land here based upon the rules that the OMB has given us. So thank you so much for that clarification. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you for the presentation, Kate. My question, mostly my commentary, goes to the stormwater management piece of this. As I read through the report, and there was definitely staff hesitation about the amount of water that could go down into the ravine and what that means, and especially in with more density and more big storm events. What other options will be explored for that, and at what stage does that come into play?
Through the mayor to the councillor, as I mentioned, the stormwater management report and the overall stormwater management design for the property is still under review, and it is ongoing. Both Conservation Halton and their staff and regional's environmental staff are reviewing that material together with town staff as well. And it has been identified that there are some concerns with respect to the outlet, whether that would be to Bronte Creek or to 14 Mile Creek. That has to be determined. As I said, that has not yet been established. So as we continue to do our review of the application, those issues are intended to be resolved before we would be able to come back to council with a recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. So, and thank you for underlining, I mean, you gave staff an opportunity to underline that they've already identified this as one of the ongoing issues that, and as I said at the start, this is the kind of meeting where we identify that list of issues to chase. So good to know that we're all concerned about that. And now it's Councillor Parmer's turn to add an issue. Councillor Parmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Kate, for the presentation. I just had a question about local parks. I didn't see anything on any of the, in the report that pointed to parkettes or local parks in the area. And I'm just wondering if that's something that staff has identified and has addressed with the applicant if you're reviewing that.
Through the mayor to the councillor, through the development concept policies that were established in the Livable Oakville Plan, there was a recognition that a portion of these lands would be conveyed back to the town as part of the natural heritage system in a similar way that we would accommodate natural heritage system conveyance and parkland dedication in the North Oakville area. There is expected to be an extension of the Valley Trail system that will run as part of run through that process. So yes, we are closely working with our parks and open space staff to identify those opportunities, but there is no need or identified need for a parkette or an isolated area of green space within this development as it's currently proposed. Those open space areas will be compensated for in other ways through the policies that have been provided.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parmer. I see no more questions, so it would be in order for someone to move receipt of the report. Pardon? We would if any new issues had been identified. Well, I don't think any have. So the motion is in order, if someone would like to make it to, as written in the agenda, 1, to receive the report, and 2, the comments from council. Councilor Robertson, thank you. I've got to learn to look in the room and on the Hollywood Squares display. Any objection to Councilor Robertson's motion? There being none, Councilor Robertson's motion carries, and thank you, everybody. That brings us to the public meeting report, an official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision for 6 Oak Inc. at 103 Burnham Thorpe Road West. And this also is an issue identification meeting, not a decision meeting. And so we have a presentation from Rob Thun, our senior planner, and he will summarize what everyone on council has studied for the assistance of the public. And then we will see if there are any public delegations and any issues. Well, we'll see if Mr. Thun has omitted any issue that council can think of. Mr. Thun, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. An official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision application has been submitted by 6 Oak Inc. for the development of approximately 23 hectares of land located at the northwest corner of Burnham Thorpe Road West and 6 Line. The report can be found on tonight's agenda as item 6.2. As you've mentioned previously, as all statutory public meetings, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to introduce the application to council and to the general public, and to obtain any further comments of the review for the application. Similar to the previous application, should someone wish to call in, the number on the screen is 905-815-6095. From a locational perspective, Your Worship, the slide identifies the site and its context with the surrounding area. As mentioned, the property is at the northwest corner of Burnham Thorpe Road West and 6 Line, where my cursor is. The site is within the West Morrison Creek subwatershed and also the 16 Mile Creek subwatershed. It also contains Core 6 woodlot that was identified in the North Oakville subwatershed study, and Core 6 is where my cursor is on the screen. Additionally, Core 7 identified in the subwatershed study is just to the south of Burnham Thorpe Road, and it's sort of this backwards L wooded area. The subject lands themselves are vacant agricultural lands. Residential dwellings, as you can see from the air photo here, are being built east of 6 Line. Halton Region also has a water reservoir on 6 Line just east of Core 8, which is where my cursor is, and the arrow identifies the reservoir. The unopened road allowance for William Halton Parkway reflects the northerly limit of the subject lands. From a proposal perspective, and I'm hoping this comes through well enough, my apologies, the draft plan does have contours on it. But as mentioned, the application is for an official plan amendment, a zoning bylaw amendment, and a draft plan relating to the 23 hectares of land. The subdivision proposes several blocks, one for employment, which is block 1 to the north, where my cursor is. Block 2 related to the principal reason for the application related to the secondary school. A stormwater management pond, block 3, fronting onto Burnham Thorpe Road, and 3 components to the natural heritage system that were envisioned by the North Oakville East Secondary Plan related to Core 6, which is block 4, and 2 linkages that connect north-south and east-west. Block 5, which is an east-west linkage, 100 meters wide, and Block 6, a linkage which is 100 meters wide. Access to the site would be from Burnham Thorpe Road, 6 Line, and the future William Halton Parkway. The applicant did have a virtual public meeting. It was held on December 6th 2 members of the public were in attendance. However, no comments were received as part of the processing of this application. With regards to Block 2, which is the high school site, the application that was submitted reflected a high school, as you can see from the proposal, a daycare, administrative building, 18 portables, a parking area, a turf field with a proposed dome, and making that turf field a 4-season use. Since the time of writing this report, staff have been informed that the administrative building is no longer being considered, and the site is presently being redesigned. With regards to this high school site, funding is available from the province. They are targeting an opening to school board of 2025, so roughly 3.5 years from now. From the region's official plan and the North Oakville East secondary plan perspective, you have 3 images on the screen. The first one to the upper left is an excerpt from ROPA 48. And the main emphasis on that one is that through the ROPA 48 process, the northerly portion where principally the playing field is on the secondary school site was redesignated from employment area to urban area in the region's official plan. The white area underneath, and unfortunately the image didn't come out too clear, but the white area underneath does reflect the natural heritage system as envisioned by the secondary plan. There are no changes to that. From the secondary plan perspective, the center image, which is an excerpt from figure NOE 2 from the secondary plan, the site is designated natural system area, natural heritage system area, transition area, and employment district. As per section 7622, use is permitted in most land use designations. Educational facilities are permitted subject to certain conditions. However, educational facilities are only permitted in the employment area if they are supported and related to an employment use. So there's a difference between being related to all the designations versus the employment. From the master plan perspective, the image in the lower right, the lands are identified as transition area, natural heritage system area, employment area. And we do show a conceptual location for a stormwater management pond. And as you can see from the draft plan, that has shifted a little bit to the west. As always, the master plan is a concept that was created in 2008, and changes to the draft or the master plan can occur. From the official plan amendment perspective, the application proposes to redesignate a portion of the site from employment district to transition area, consistent with ROPA 48, reflecting the northerly area of Block 2 on the proposed draft plan. It also relocates the secondary school symbol from the northwest corner of Neagawa Boulevard in Dundas, and that is located where my cursor is right now, to Block 2 on the subject property. And it also introduces new official plan policies related to the secondary school use. And that OPA can be seen in Appendix A1. From a zoning perspective, presently the property is zoned FD, not ED as I see in theirs. In the slide, FD was related to a recent omnibus bill, Bylaw 2022-07, that was council approved recently. So it has moved from ED, existing development, to FD, future development. So with that being said, the application proposes to rezone the site from FD, future development, to several site-specific zones, those being institutional zone, light employment zone, the natural heritage system, reflecting the 3 blocks that I previously mentioned, and the stormwater management facility along the north side of Burnhamthorpe Road. And all this is to permit the redevelopment of the site for the high school, an employment block, a stormwater management block, and the NHS block. And there, the applicant zoning bylaw amendment can be found on Appendix A2. Staff are continuing to work with the applicant on both the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment. On this slide, you will see a number of bullet points related to matters that staff have identified. The review continues on the plan, and not all comments have been received. So this list can be increased with regards to any comments that are received, and those will be addressed accordingly in the future recommendation report. Of note, concerns about the school parking have been raised in the past by council on other applications that I brought before council. For council's information, secondary school parking is based on classrooms and has a range of 1 to 3 parking spaces per classroom. Staff will be reviewing this matter in more detail to better understand the actual operational needs of the school as related to the zoning and what is actually necessary for the site. That will be addressed in the future recommendation report. In addition, matters related to the lighting of the sports field, considering the residential uses to the east of 6th Line and the proposed dome and its operation of the dome. So that will be further reviewed as part of the future recommendation report. All comments raised tonight by the public and by council will be addressed, as I mentioned, in the future recommendation report. So in conclusion, Your Worship, staff are putting forward the following recommendation for council's consideration of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. I was especially grateful to see the recognition of the parking, the need to be careful about the parking needs. That's going to be very well appreciated by everybody. And I see hands. First, we'll go to Councillor Knoll, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Hazard-Thiel. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. I'm sure that our Ward 7 colleagues are very excited by this project. This is a school project long in the making and badly needed. I have a question with respect to the removal or the moving of the designation, the H from Neagawa and Dundas to this site. When does it actually happen? Is it upon approval of the OP, or is there an additional action required subsequent to that? Will that be an automatic change for that particular property?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Knoll, as part of this application, the aspect of the relocation of the high school symbol from the corner on Neagawa to this site will occur through this process.
Okay, so nothing else is required. So once that happens and it's done, the H is gone and that property owner can move on with their property. Terrific. With respect, thank you for picking up the issue around the dome. I also acknowledge the parking issue, but the dome issue about who's operating it and light pollution and such, that's an important piece, particularly in light of the proximity of that site to residential. So thank you for that. I have a curiosity I want to just explore. We're talking about climate change and we've talked about EV chargers and such. I'm not sure where that falls in line in these kinds of facilities. Do we require, or will we be requiring some form of EV charging facilities required on the site, like we're starting to do for condominiums and such now? Is that something we're contemplating? Is that something we can do?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Knoll, that is one of the matters we can look into along with the school board, just to provide those.
I mean, it's time to start thinking about that in those settings as well as the settings of residential and commercial facilities. And my last question is, and it was addressed in your narrative, and with respect to that office building that was situated on Burnhamthorpe, you said that's being reconsidered at this point, you said.
That is correct. I've been advised by school staff that the administration building is not part of the application anymore.
When you're calling it an administration building, was it actually an administration building connected to the school board, or was it for third-party use?
School board.
Okay, good. Because when I saw office space, I was thinking that they're going to be renting it out to commercial businesses, because that would obviously
no, it was school board related.
That site. That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Mr. Thun, for an excellent report. I think the issues have been captured very well. I do have a request for the parking matter that you addressed in the report. If you could bring back some comparisons just in regards to other high schools in North Oakville, so we have something to compare it to. And I wanted to follow up on the school offices being removed from the site. What could we expect being used in that area instead? Would we see a larger school footprint? Would we see additional parking? Or is it just going to be a reconfiguration of what's already being presented?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Parmar. The administration building will be removed, but there will be a reorientation of the high school itself with the daycare. So those two uses, the school and the daycare, are the principal uses that are going to be located on the corner.
Okay. And then just back to the parking matter as well. Just with the dome and the daycare and the third-party uses, I'm just really interested to see what the ratios will be, because I think that this site may require, parking above what the minimum ratios are. So if when this report comes back, all of that information is readily available, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of quick questions. One, I know we have an issue with parking and so forth, but the real issue we have with our high schools is the drop-off and pickup. And I know you mentioned 3 entrances. Is there any consideration to look at added lanes for cars that come in for drop-off and pick-up? Their children, as you know, everyone drives their children to school. That's something that has immense impact in a lot of our schools. With respect to traffic congestion, so something to consider. And I'm happy to understand with respect to the charging stations. I think that's a great move to put into the plans. And that's about it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Could you help me understand a bit more about the high school and the employment designation that's close by it? So what is, for example, what's the transition distance from the high school to the closest employment area?
If I may get the presentation back on the screen, Your Worship. A few more back, please. Oh. So from the existing secondary plan perspective, the blue area here is the employment that's being redesignated transition. So the buffering between the high school site and the employment area will be the natural heritage system, which will be conveyed to the municipality. The linkage, as I had mentioned, which is the area where my cursor is 100 meters wide. Then you have the woodlot that is to the west, which is Core 6. And then additionally, you have another 100-meter wide linkage, which goes south across Burnham Thorpe Road and connects up to Core 7.
So we have approximately 200 meters from the high school site to what would be an active employment use at some point.
Give or take. You have the football field, you have the linkage, you have the parking area, the open field area in between, and then you will have the actual school site, the school building.
So thank you for that clarification. In your report, you call it light employment. Can you tell me what you mean by that? Because I don't see light employment in the zoning definitions.
Light employment is anything that's not heavy-duty manufacturing.
So perhaps my question is from Mr. Charles then. I don't want to wordsmith tonight, but that's the exact problem we have with other issues that we're facing around what is employment use and definitions. So is it E2? Is it E1? Is it E3? Because it matters to that high school what could potentially go there. And light employment, if it's not heavy industrial, could include heavy scale manufacturing, which is, sorry, I said manufacturing, heavy use warehousing. Do I have that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The North Oakville East Secondary Plan has a different policy construct from the Livable Oakville Plan south of Dundas. And similarly, we have a different construct in terms of our zoning bylaw. So one of the things that we can do when we bring this back to council is we can provide a little bit more clarity around the zoning that we would be looking at for the employment uses here to provide some more scope in terms of the types of uses, et cetera, so that they align more closely in terms of what the existing policy permits. Further to that, we are looking at, further to council's resolution a little while ago, getting into providing more information to council in terms of warehouse definitions and some more information that council had asked for, and our target for that still remains early into 23.
So thank you for that. I guess my takeaway on this particular report is that I would have a concern about an E2 use by that high school until those warehouse definitions and that work is done. So if this is going to come back for approval before that work is done, then this high school should not have to face a warehouse of the scale and magnitude that it could potentially, if it's not clarified what the use could be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We have Councillor Knoll back. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize, I'd forgotten a question I had earlier. I also apologize if I don't know the answer to this question. Do we normally circulate these applications through any of our friends at the Halton Regional Police for an eye towards CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, in light of the safety of the students and the staff at these schools? Is that something that we normally do? And if not, can we do that? Is that something that would be possible?
Through your worship to Councillor Knoll, Halton Regional Police are normally circulated with the application. 9 times out of 10, no comments are received.
Okay.
Okay, but I take your direction, and I will follow up with them with regards to the school use versus the employment.
Yeah, I would make a particular emphasis on reviewing the site from a CPTED point of view. I mean, when you consider the concerns we have these days around human trafficking and all these sorts of very significant issues that revolve around young people, I think it'd be worth having a really close look at the design of the school to look for those potential public safety hotspots that do exist in some institutional buildings now. So it would be great if you could maybe flag that, and I would certainly be prepared to talk to the team there as well, just to ask them to keep an eye on it as it comes through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Mr. Charles, I heard a concern about electric vehicle charging stations, parking ratios perhaps needing to be boosted because of the uses, and whether or not there were sufficient laybys for the parents, not just the buses, as already detailed in Mr. Thunn's excellent report. And then finally, I heard a desire to find a way to prevent warehouses from being too close to the high school. And did you hear any other issues?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You captured it well, and we'll follow up with Councillor Knoll's suggestion to flag it with the Halton Police.
Super. And thank you, everybody. So it would be in order now for someone to move receipt of the comments and as have been provided by the council. And I see Councillor Palmer on the screen. Thank you, Councillor Palmer, for the motion. All those, is anyone in opposition to that motion? Madam Clerk, I see no opposition, and so I'd call that carried. And thank you, Council. That brings us now to discussion item 7.1. And this is the recommendation report. This is the other half of the process that we just did on those other 2 items, where long ago we had the equivalent of those meetings for this one. And this is the result. This is the recommendation report for 70 Old Mill Road, an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. And we have a staff presentation by Tricia Collingwood, our senior planner, who will review for the public who may be watching what council has studied already. And we have registered delegations from at least 3. We have registered delegations from 3 people, and we will, of course, welcome people to phone in and comment. Trish, you have the floor, and we look forward to your report.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. My staff report can be found as item 7.1 of your agenda. And this report recommends approval of the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendments to permit a 12-story building with 154 residential units. The subject lands are located within Midtown Oakville, the Midtown Oakville growth area. It's a designated provincial urban growth center. The property is located on the south side of the Oakville Go via Lakeshore West Line, which is the hub of this major transit station area. The site has direct pedestrian access to the station, and the subject property is the last of the 4 properties along Old Mill Road to develop. The entire property is 1.75 hectares, and 70 Old Mill Road has a lot area of approximately 0.15 hectares. This is Schedule A1 on the slide it's the urban structure for the town of Oakville and the Livable Oakville Plan. It provides the basic structural elements of nodes and corridors where higher intensity forms of growth are to be accommodated. The site is within a designated regional transit node as well as along a provincial priority transit corridor. It's noted here in the yellow star, excuse me. Regional transit nodes are located at key locations to integrate with the town-wide transportation system and to provide a focus for transit supportive development. Within the Livable Oakville Plan, the site is designated high-density residential. It has a building height permission for 6 to 12 stories. And policies within Part D of Livable Oakville Plan, within the Livable Oakville Plan, permit this type of residential development form and state that residential high dense designations have a density of up to 185 units per site hectare. The lands are also located within the Cornwall District and shall, according to Livable Oakville Plan, include taller residential and mixed-use buildings located in the vicinity of the 16 Mile Creek and Trafalgar Road. Subject lands and the rest of the larger property are zoned residential high with a special provision 191. The Old Mill properties, including this site, have a development history that I do detail within my staff report. It goes back to about 1994 when the site was rezoned to permit residential buildings, apartment buildings, as well as multiple family dwellings, health club, and local commercial uses. The site plan application there was a site plan application submitted approximately a little over 5 years ago by the current applicant. It was granted conditional site plan approval for a 9-story building with 29 residential units, which was consistent with the official plan and the zoning bylaw. Construction and underground works did commence prior to COVID and then stalled based on construction shutdowns. The applicant at that time took the opportunity to revisit the application and has since withdrawn and come in with the subject application before us. The building's proposed to accommodate 154 residential units with 166 parking spaces and 67 bicycle parking spaces, which will be located in an underground garage, as well as the visitor parking will be shared with the rest of the condo units along from the Old Mill property in a surface lot that contains approximately 30 parking spaces for visitors. Vehicle access is proposed from Old Mill Road, and pedestrians will be able to enter the site from an entrance internally off of Old Mill Road, internal to the site, as well as off of Cornwall Road. This is one of the proposed renderings that the applicant has provided. The proposal has been reviewed in context of the Livable by Design Urban Design Manual and the Designing Midtown Oakville Guidance Document. The location of the site within Midtown Oakville, fronting onto Old Mill Road and Cornwall Road, adjacent to the Lakeshore West Rail Line, does present an important, or does play an important role to the the evaluation of the urban design policies and principles used for the site. And those guidelines have been included as Appendix B to this report that will guide the future site plan that we anticipate coming in shortly. The following is an overview of the matters that were identified in the staff report that was presented on February 15th. My staff report for tonight's meeting includes a resolution of those, a discussion and resolution of those issues. There's the alignment with the climate emergency declared by council, consistency and conformity with the provincial Metrolinx regional and livable Oakville policies, compliance with the Livable by Design manual, justification for the proposed modifications to the official plan policies, appropriateness of the proposed zoning modifications, and establishment of an appropriate parking standard. I'm just going to use this slide, another proposed rendering, and I just want to, those issues that I just highlighted and went through, use this slide just to sort of illustrate how it meets many of those issues, how this proposal sort of addresses many of those issues with regards to climate and provincial initiatives and policy. So you can see we've got compact urban form with increased densities, and we know that's inherently more transit supportive. It's adjacent and has pedestrian access to the GO station, thereby implying that the cars on the site on the slide that you see will not be from this development. They will be able to access the station. It's, again, along a provincial priority transit corridor, which is the Lakeshore line. Transit demand management initiatives such as real-time transit information could be included in the lobby. Car and cycling share programs could be included on site, and unbundling parking opportunities are options that staff intend to explore with the applicant through the review of the future site plan application. Provincially, the site is located within a settlement area and a built-up area. In the Midtown area, growth area is also the major transit, includes the major transit station area, as you can see here. Since February 5th, or sorry, at the February 15th meeting, additional issues were raised by council and public. Those include provide clarity on the density calculation over the entirety of the site. Can the site accommodate an underground parking garage of 6 levels? I just want to address those ones first. The density calculation over the entire, when I speak of a density calculation for the site, I am talking about the entire site, not just the block, the leftover block. So it does look at the entire site. Currently, there's 307 units on the site. An additional 154 will bring that to 462 units on the site. And we are looking at a density of approximately 260 units across the entire site. With regards to accommodating an underground parking garage of 6 levels, a geotechnical study has been prepared and will be submitted as part of the site plan application, and then we will be looking at that closely. I want to address the next point, which was consider options to increase the mix of units. My report was written to address what was previously proposed, which was 70% 1-bedroom and 30% 2-bedroom. As of this morning, the applicant has advised us that they are looking at the entire layout of their floor plans to include 50% 1-bedrooms and 50% 2 and 3-bedroom units. So through the site plan application, we will be looking at that breakdown and I know there is quite a bit of priority in looking at how to get the larger family size units into this building. With regards to the other issues that were on the previous slide, but reviewing the transportation study and considering the future development potential of the adjacent Metrolinx parking lot, which is noted here in the green star, that I am not aware at this point of Metrolinx's plans for that parking, the existing parking lot. It could look, they could, if they continued with their parking strategy of years ago, there was plans to build a second garage there. It could also be developed for residential and/or mixed-use development, and we will assess those plans when they come in as part of an application. And another issue that is raised with regards to both issues, the development of if that site were to be developed as another parking garage, and the existing, it's kind of a combined twofold, and the existing issues we're having at the terminus of Old Mill Roads that is shown in the red square. You can actually see a car sitting there. The 5 green arrows are the kiss and ride, and what staff has been made aware of is there is an issue at the end of Old Mill Road where cars are not pulling in and using the kiss and ride. They're actually sitting at the end of Old Mill Road and waiting for passengers to come off of the train or the buses. There's concerns about them blocking the access into the Old Mill condos. The applicant has started taking a look at this. They've got a surveyor out there taking a look at how and what kind of options are available to potentially reconfigure the terminus of Old Mill Road so that it is more clear there's a driveway there and will prohibit cars stopping like they are right there in that red square, hopefully creating a safer situation, and that will be included as part of the site plan application for the engineering department to review. So the application, and tonight what we're proposing is approval of Bylaw 2022-046, which is official plan amendment number 43. And what that does, that has the effect of removing the existing special exception in the official plan, which permitted the neighborhood shopping center, non-retail service commercial area, offices, and private recreational uses, health clubs, and that kind of thing. So what the modification tonight that I'm presenting does, it removes those permissions and adds a maximum of 300 units per hectare across the entire site, not just 70 Old Mill, but across all of the Old Mill properties. And as I mentioned earlier, it's about, with this proposal, it's up to about 260 units. It places a maximum of 12 stories on the site, while at the same time recognizing a mezzanine story within the building, which is required to have the functional, accessible access off of Cornwall Road that staff has been insistent on, that there be a functional access that pedestrians can use from Cornwall Road in relation to the grades of the site. And it maintains a maximum of 155 square meters of net leasable commercial floor area within 70 Old Mill. Bylaw 2022-047 is for the zoning bylaw amendment, and that is detailed in my staff report. Again, the effect of the modifications include yard setbacks and lot coverages, balcony permissions in all yards, reducing the setback from the railway to 25 meters from 30 meters, which is currently our Metrolinx and the town's standard. However, the current setback in Special Provision 191 is 20 meters. So we're increasing it for 70 Old Mill and placing it at 25 meters. I have a minimum and maximum height of 8 to 12 stories, up to 46 meters. That matches the 12-story proposal. A maximum of 154 units. establishing a minimum of 0.75 units, parking spaces per unit and a maximum of 1 per unit. And this is to recognize the locational value of the site. It also includes 0.15 parking spaces, visitor parking spaces per unit, most of which will be found can be shared with the 30 spaces that are existing now. Electrical vehicles, as always, in looking at a minimum of 20%. The applicant is looking at exceeding that greatly, and restricting location of stairs and air vents so that we don't see them along Old Mill Road or Cornwall. Just quickly, so this current process is the staff recommendation to approve the applications and bylaws with holding conditions. So the region has a couple of holding conditions with regards to servicing in the Midtown area, as well as just looking at an update to the functional servicing report. And from town's perspective, we were looking for just a cleanup and an update of the transportation impact study. So 3 holds are placed on the bylaw. So that's the current process. The future process would include lifting those holding conditions. That requires an application, a site plan application, a review of the site plan application with regard to Appendix B, which I referred to earlier, which are the urban design requirements, and the draft plan of condominium application. The slide includes the recommendations for tonight, and they are included in my report, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Collingwood. Council, do you have questions? Oh, first, Madam Clerk, did we have any delegations phone in?
No, but we're 3 listed.
Okay. Then, Madam Clerk, would you please call the delegations?
Our first listed delegation is Sandra Montgomery.
Ms. Montgomery, we will look forward to your information as soon as we see you appear, and remember to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hello, we hear you very well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Your Worship and members of council, my name is Sandra Montgomery. I am the elected treasurer of Halton Condo Corporation 397, which is 60 Old Mill Road. I am a member also of the Shared Facility Committee, which represents the 3 existing corporations of Oak Ridge Heights, and a board-appointed member of a current working group, which was created in January of 2021, and it has worked with the developer on this particular project since that time. I've actually been involved with the file that relates to 70 Old Mill Road since 2012. 60 Old Mill is directly adjacent to the proposed development outlined in this application. I communicated with you at the February 15th public meeting that the board of 60 Old Mill Road had provided support in principle, or has provided support in principle, for the proposed project. Why? Firstly, we know intensification is a provincial, regional, and municipal mandate for the neighborhood, and that significant change is coming. Although change can be difficult to embrace, we have a responsibility as board members to present the big picture and seek the best negotiated agreement with the developer we can. Secondly, although these are operational matters for the boards of our 3 existing corporations and not part of the town's mandate, this application before you presents us with an excellent opportunity to address these matters once and for all. The first for us are the easements. This particular parcel of land has a significant number of easements throughout the entire parcel that involves the 3 existing corporations. The most significant involve the entrance and exit ramps and access to the existing underground garage. This developer, as part of our negotiated agreed upon item, has agreed to release and abandon these specific easements that have been in question for quite some time. Secondly, an all residential development, and again, this is something that working with the working group, with the developer, we've come to an understanding that it will be an all residential development. And now to eliminate any future potential for a mixed use development, which is currently possible within the high density residential designation for this parcel of land. A developer we know and have worked with over the past 6 years, and with whom have developed a positive collaborative working relationship, versus a new owner agent who takes a very different tact and decides to use his or her rights to a number of access points throughout the property, starting tomorrow if they wished, thus having a far greater negative impact on the entire community. Number 4, fiscal responsibility, avoiding the Ontario Land Tribunal route, which could be very costly to all owners within the complex, as our lawyer has advised, with very minimal and no chance of success, given the new provincial mandates for intensification in the immediate area. A huge amount of money spent with no chance of winning. We understand clearly that both parties are benefiting from the working group's negotiations. I can assure you we have looked and embraced the big picture and am here before you this evening to indicate tonight that the board of 60 Old Mill does not oppose this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. There don't appear to be any questions for you, but thank you for bringing your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Jane Huddleston.
Welcome, Ms. Huddleston. As we wait for your, your little block to show up, let me remind you to unmute yourself when you get here. We see you now. We just need you to unmute.
Okay.
There you are. Welcome.
Yes.
Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. I'm representing the condominium board at 40 Old Mill Road. And in the past, some statements have been made and published in documents distributed to the town by representatives of 50 and 60 Old Mill, indicating that the 3 buildings support this application. In actual fact, the developer made a verbal agreement or a verbal request that required them to say that in return, he said he would remove easements he has over the property and comply with some other requests that apply only after the building is occupied. At 40 Old Mill, we believe we should only make public statements as a board after consultation with the owners, and that those statements are true in the owner's opinion. We strongly encouraged 40 and 50 and 60 Old Mill to gather data regarding their owner's support or opposition to this new building. We recently polled our owners at 40 Old Mill, and the result was 76.09% opposed to the development, 23.91% supported. Among those who added comments, those in opposition tended to cite density, traffic, and placement of the garage. Among those who supported, the comments tended to be something like, well, something has to go there, I don't think we have a choice. Or they voted in support, but then added, but only if, and provided a list of desired changes. The statements of support that have been made in the past were not fact-based and do not reflect the view of the homeowners on Old Mill Road. They were made only to comply with a request by the developer. That request from the developer for support of his project was made in the context of an exchange for him removing easements and making other promises about his development. The agreement has never been completed and signed, and the easements have not been removed from title. The board at 40 Old Mill has been receiving angry emails from the developer recently since we are not expressing our support. He complains about the amount of money he has invested so far and pressure from his lender, which is not our problem. Therefore, we feel a deferral of this decision is in the best interest of all parties.
All right, thank you, Ms. Huddleston. Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Jet James.
Welcome, Ms. James. And you've unmuted yourself. Well, then you muted yourself again, but if you unmute, we'll be able to hear you. There you go. Welcome to the meeting.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you very well, and we look forward to your information.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor Burton, councilors and town staff. My name is Yetta James, and I'm the Director of Development for Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association, and I'm delegating tonight to oppose the proposed bylaw change for the site located at 70 Old Mill. I'm going to now repeat some of the information that was provided by Ms. Collingwood. The subject property is the last of the 4 buildings on the Old Mill Road development. The entire property is 1,893 hectares. The subject building, 70 Old Mill, has a lot area of approximately 0.158 hectares or 0.39 acres or 1,700 square feet, which is only 8.3% of the total land. This site is actually more suited to a single detached home than a condominium of 154 units. It is the smallest footprint of all the buildings. Approval of the bylaw allowing 154 units will mean that the density of this site is actually 974 units per square hectare. This is a very misleading, disingenuous, not candid, averaging out of the density over all 4 sites, giving a density of 243 units per square hectare rather than the actual 974 units per square hectare. This is setting a very dangerous precedent for the entire Midtown development. This is an established residential neighborhood. The massive scale of this proposed development will cause extensive disruption to the community for several years during development. Parking for the current residents and visitors of the 3 established buildings was approved at 1.75 spaces per unit, giving a total of 537 parking spaces. At least 50% of the outdoor visitor spaces, and that's approximately 60 spaces, are used on a daily basis for contractors that need to provide services required by law, such as pool, furnace maintenance, elevator maintenance, and plus residents that are moving in and out, renovations and repairs. And this doesn't even include the parcel and food deliveries. 166 spaces, including visitor spaces, for the 154 units is less than 1.1 space per unit. It will be completely insufficient regardless of how many bicycle spaces that are provided. Earlier this evening, the current development proposal was revised to show 50% 1-bedroom units and 50% 2-bedroom units. That's 77 bedroom units that are 1-bedroom. It is reasonable to expect that many of those units will be leased out or rented out by the owners. And this will lead to quite a frequent moving in and out by residents, which will again significantly increase parking and traffic issues in the area. Old Mill is already a dangerous place for residents in the Old Mill condominiums. It's used as an unofficial kiss and ride drop off for GO train commuters, as well as an exit from the Metrolinx car park. Adding another 166 vehicles, plus all the delivery, removal, and maintenance vehicles, is a recipe for disaster. Cornwall is a very busy road. Even during the pandemic, it was very busy. Adding all the extra trips per day will increase travel times and levels of frustration for all of the residential users of Cornwall Road. Previously, 29 units were approved to be built on this site. Municipal services such as wastewater disposal have been designed on this basis. 125 additional units will add significant stress to these services. So in conclusion, I want to emphasize that the TCRA would very much love to see this site developed. However, the proposed extreme increase in density of this site does not fit within Livable Oakville's plan. It will increase traffic problems and put additional strain on municipal services. And that concludes our comments, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. James, for your information. Council appreciates your time. All right, Council, I believe it's time to make a decision. I'm looking to you. Councillor Hazard-Thiel.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I do have a few questions of staff, if that's acceptable.
It's always in order.
Okay. So, Ms. Collingwood, could you just clarify the size of the Old Mill property, not this specific 70 Old Mill, but the entirety of that property?
After road right-of-way widenings along Cornwall Road, I believe what I have been told by the legal survey and the applicant is it's at 1.75. So we do see the 1.89 figure floating around, but there is a road widening that will be taken off of Cornwall to as part of this development at the site plan stage.
So forgive me, my hearing tonight is not the greatest. So 1.89 hectares?
1.89, but after the road widening, I understand it will be 1.75, which is what I use for the density calculation.
Okay, and that's covers 40, 50, 60, and 70?
Yes.
So there might be some misunderstanding about the size of the site. Okay. In terms of the questions in regards to density, again, from a calculation perspective, is this site going at 154 units? What is the density on that site?
The site or the entire property? Through you, Mayor Burton. For the entire property, it's 264 units.
And so for the individual site, which seems to be a concern for those that have delegated, do we know that?
I do. I believe I do. I believe it's upwards of above 500 for this block. I think the issue is that none of the densities on this property have ever been looked at on a block by block basis. It's always been looked at for the entire property for all 4 buildings.
Okay. Which was the part of what happened at the OMB decision, I think, at one point. Is that correct? Okay. My other questions, and I know you covered this, but I just want to make sure there's clarity. So should this get approved tonight, at site plan, there will be a further discussion about traffic flow. There'd be a further discussion about streetscape and entry off Cornwall. Will there be any further discussion about parking?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes. So through the bylaw today, we are setting a range for the parking allocation through Through the site plan application, we'll be looking at whether or not the applicant is unbundling the parking from the units, so not selling a unit a parking space per unit, but unbundling and allowing purchasers to choose to buy a space. We will also be looking at a parking utilization study for the entire site to get a better idea of the use of the visitor parking, as has been raised by some of the delegates with regards to trades using a number of the on-site surface parking spaces for visitors, and as well as just across the site looking at what the utilization is of the existing parking spaces. So we'll be looking at a number of things with the site plan application.
Thank you for all of that. The change in terms of the mix of use today that the developer has spoken to around a 50% one bedroom, 50% 2 to 3 bedroom. So that reduces the number of units from 150, the maximum 154. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, reasonably, yes, that sounds like that's what should happen. I don't want to presuppose before I see the floor plans, but yes, adding larger units should reduce the number of units within the building.
Okay. My other question is around these easements that have been raised. Do the conditions that some of the condo boards have talked about having in place with the developer affect the zoning amendment and the site plan? And if they do, can you just help us understand how they do?
Through you, Mayor Burton, they do not. So they mostly govern the internal workings of the site. The access is there. The access is permitted. The easements are all in place to allow for how the site functions today. When the site plan came in 2015, I believe it was, we processed the site plan, sat in on discussions with the shared facilities agreement with the condo board owners to better understand what the concerns were with the easements, and there were no issues that we foresaw that would prohibit or limit any use of the site.
Okay. One additional question is, in the appendix for the design guidelines, and I raised this before, we talk about compatibility with other buildings, but the actual appendix talks about a creative, I can put my fingers on it right away, hold on. It says, provide a creative, innovative building design consisting of varied architectural elements in a cohesive and coherent composition. But the next sentence says, the building design should complement the neighboring existing and planned development. I think those are opposite views when you look at this design, and we've raised before that the design does not appear to be compatible with the original 3 buildings. If this passes tonight, is there weight that can be put on that it is complementary to those neighboring and existing buildings versus not?
Through you, Mayor Burton, first of all, so through the site plan application and what we evaluate and review through the urban design staff will be materials, the architecture, the design, the features, as well as the function and the accessibility to the site. So that will all be taken into consideration, first of all. With regards to complementary, I know that there's a lot of opinions out there on what complementary could and is. And through site plan, we do have a variety of options of how to review such an application. And our urban design staff are aware of council concerns with regards to being compatible and complementary, and we'll be taking another look at it through that lens. We did not spend a great deal of time on the design at this time because it was a zoning and OPA and not a site plan application. So urban design staff will be more heavily involved with that next application. And as well, the applicant has communicated this morning that he does understand there's some concerns with the proposed renderings, the proposed design, and we'll be taking another look at it as well. So I feel that that message has been received, and we will have quite a bit of work to do from our end and his through the site plan application to bring maybe a little bit more of a compatibility lens to it.
Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Ms. Collingwood, got a number of questions that have been asked by Councillor Hasletfield, which is great. Your report talks about the built-up area and priority transit corridors. That's clear. I've had a number of comments regarding settlement area. Can you provide a little background on what a settlement area is?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, settlement areas, they're designated, I'm going to get some of this wrong. I might need some help, but the provincial policy statement and the growth plan both designate settlement areas with regards to where intensification is best suited. And, you know, Midtown is also designated a provincial urban growth area. These layers, overlays, they pile on to one another. The settlement area, most of Oakville, from what I understand, is within the settlement area, and then the urban growth areas and our designated growth areas further justify the intensification of the. I'm losing my words. Sorry, of the. Especially along corridors, provincial transit corridors and those areas. But I do need some assistance on this. I've lost my words.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. I think what Ms. Collingwood is getting at is that because we're in an urban growth center, we do have a target of 200 people and jobs that we are looking to bring into Midtown or the entirety of the area. So in terms of the growth plan and the structure of the growth plan and the way the regional plan and our local plan all implement that, what we're getting at is this is a prime location for the type of intensity that's being brought forward through this proposal.
Thank you. On page 14 of the report, it talks, bullet B, it talks about a minimum gross density of 200 residents and jobs combined per hectare, which totals up to the 20,000 residents and jobs by 2031. On page 16, the livable Oakville plan talks about increasing densities for a minimum growth target of 200 units per site hectare. So one's talking 200 units and 200 residents. Can you just clarify that? That seems to have created some confusion as well.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our livable Oakville residential, straight residential designations speak to units, residential units per site hectare, whereas in our growth areas where we have the mixed use in our provincial growth area in Midtown, we are looking at a mix of uses to include jobs and units. So it speaks to 200 people and jobs in the Midtown area, which is the way we're planning for that growth area.
So the overall acreage versus individual lot site. All right, and servicing. You mentioned a hold in terms of servicing and some of the items that we're going to be looked at. What about sanitary and water? That's one of the H's or holds.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is the first H, is to ensure that there's water and wastewater capacity for the site development.
And that's for all of Midtown, not just this property, I take it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. That is the messaging we're receiving from the region.
All right, and you mentioned the stub or the end of Old Mill. That's great to hear. There are over 400 homes in the area, and I'm glad to see that that is going to be worked on through the site plan. And we've heard a lot about the shared facilities agreement in terms of an arrangement between the 3 current buildings and the 4th property that is automatically a part of that. That's the parking, the snow plowing, the gardening services that the joint homeowners use together.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, exactly. The shared use agreement looks at the proportion of each building and its impact to the site, and therefore the financial contributions to the upkeep of the area or of that development. And then I recall years ago when the site plan agreement was done and there was 29 units proposed for 70 Old Mill, the shared use agreement, I recall being part of those discussions. And I understand that that agreement had to be redone to recognize the increase in units.
All right, and that's strictly civil. That's nothing through that the town is involved with.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the town is not included or has not been involved in those discussions. We just were included at the time, especially when there was discussion with regards to expanding the waste area. So that discussion, 70 Old Mill was going to undertake the expansion of the waste area to accommodate their waste. And so that was part of, revisions to the site plan or revisions to the shared use agreement, whereas now all 70 Old Mill waste will be internal to the site. There won't be an expansion. And so that I'm sure the shared use agreement is reflecting that now.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Hazard-Thiel.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Sorry for coming back in. A question has come in that was, I guess she wasn't on the delegation list, but I do want to make sure it's clear. So I asked you a question in regards to density and the calculation of density. And there is a section on page 25 of the report that talks about the density capacity of 185 units per site hectare. And then it says the entire property consisting of 40, 50, 60, and 70 is 1.893 hectares in size with a total number of 307 residential units. So are the 307 residential units not 40, 50, and 60?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the 307 units are 40, 50, 60. Those are the existing residential units. It doesn't take into account the 3 superintendent units, but those are the residential units on site that are there now.
Okay, so that was just like 70 is not included in that 307 residential units. So in terms of the number of units, is it 264 units per site hectare? Are we confident that is correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is an error in my report. So if you take the 307 units, you add the 154 units, you get 462 units.
Right.
You apply that to 1.75 hectares, which is the land area after the future right-of-way taking, you get the 264. If you apply the 1.89, you get 240 units. So I should have included the 1.75, not the 1.89.
Okay, and I'm sorry to make you go through the numbers in your head. So good for you for being able to do that even in your head. And so one other point of clarification, the high density and the Trafalgar corridor is around 300 units per hectare. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, through the Trafalgar Road corridor study, we did, there was a recommendation, it is included in the OP policies, that along the Trafalgar corridor, we are looking at upwards of a max 300 units per site hectare. I can't recall the date of the Trafalgar Road study, but I'm going to say 2016, 2017. And so the 300 units per site hectare is the sort of intensification we were looking for along a transit priority corridor. This, we believe, is consistent with that.
Okay, thank you for your patience with my questions. Thank you, Mayor Burton.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, are you ready to make a decision?
Dave's got his hand up.
Oh, there he is. Councillor Giddings.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this has been a long process. It's been over a decade that the residents at 40, 50, and 60 have been working with this. And given the changes in provincial policy and in terms of where we are with this, I will move acceptance of the report before us.
So if I understood you through your mask, which was a little bit of a challenge here. Probably
my apologies.
My fault, but you've moved the staff recommendation, is that correct? Thank you.
Correct.
Thank you, that's in order and it's duly moved. Is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, Councillor Giddings' motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Council, you've now been meeting for almost 2 hours, and I would like to offer you a 10 or 15-minute break for to stretch, look after your personal needs, and get a glass of water. And could we agree to return at 8:25? Thank you. We are in recess. All right, thank you for rejoining us as we've come back from our short little recess. I'm going to guess that Councillor Duddick might like to move item 7.2, the Heritage Grant Program. Thank you, Councillor Duddick. And I think we're all pleased at the increase in that as well. Any objection to Councillor Duddick's motion? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you, everybody. Now, we come to item number 7.3. We have at least 9 listed delegations. And this is the Ontario Land Tribunal appeal at Lakeshore Road and 83 East Street, which for quite some time we've all just referred to as the East Street application. Our purpose tonight is to discuss a possible settlement to the tribunal case, and our intention is to do that in public and with the full participation and commentary of the interested members of the public who've registered. And this has been quite an ongoing matter. I want to explain that we have a public item listed and we have a confidential item listed. The confidential item is legal advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege. And it's my hope that council will make whatever a decision it decides to make fully in public without going into camera. I don't believe there's any need to go into camera to consider the confidential 8.1 item, but we will have to have 2 separate motions to deal with each of them. And of course, if council would prefer to go into camera, that's a matter for council to vote on. I just merely wanted to indicate my preference that we do this as much in public as possible. So we're going to turn our attention first to Jennifer Huckwith. She is the Assistant Town Solicitor, and she has a presentation on the matter so far. Ms. Huckwith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the mayor had indicated, there's 2 items on the agenda tonight, which council will be considering sequentially. The first is the public item. Tonight will be describing the similarities and differences between the options which are available to council. All of the advice, including legal advice with respect to how council may pursue this at the tribunal or through further negotiations, is provided in the confidential report only. So the property is located at what we traditionally think of as the southeast corner of Lakeshore Road and East Street. I'm told it's actually northeast, but I'm going to continue to refer to it as southeast because that reflects my understanding as well as that of the public. Just by way of background, the application is for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments which would allow for a 15-story building. This would be achieved through 9 stories of bonusing, which is over and above the 6 stories, which is permitted under the standard provisions of the official plan. And I will get into what bonusing means at a later stage of the presentation. The official plan permits up to 10 stories. That's 6 stories in the basic provisions plus 4 stories through bonusing. There was a public meeting in October of 2021 at which council heard a number of presentations. There were a few positive comments. There were a lot of negative comments. And I've summarized the nature of those comments in the public report. But a lot of the comments related to height, massing, size of the building. The application was appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal in January of this year. There are currently no hearing dates have been set, but we have been contacted by the Ontario Land Tribunal, and we will be setting dates in the near future for a case management conference or other proceeding to get this matter moving. So the basic options that council have are accept a 15-story building, accept a 13-story building, accept a 10-story building, or oppose the application at a hearing before the Ontario Land Tribunal. There could be variations of these options. The options which we have been provided through settlement reflect the applicant's response to comments that were made by town staff in processing the application, members of public, and members of council. There could be some additional flexibility in proceeding, but if you want substantial change could only be achieved through a hearing. So I wanted to begin by just showing you the 15 and the 13-story buildings side by side. I've adjusted the 2 pictures so that they're similar in size, so you can get an idea of what is provided. I can tell you that all options contain similar floor area, the same number of units, same number of parking spaces, at least between the 13 and the 10-story. There was a few more in the 15. And the changes have been accommodated by some internal and external changes, which generally maintain the same building shape for the 13-story building. The 10-story and 13-story options are different. The obvious difference is height, 10 or 13 stories. And I can advise the 10-story option is 8 stories at the front, and then there's a 10-story L that wraps around that you can see on the left-hand side of the building. Oops, let's go forward again, hopefully. The other main difference, which this slide illustrates, is what happens at the corner. In the 13-story building, there is a public square and an open area at the corner. In the 10-story option, there's less public space, but there's commercial space which occupies the portion of the building which is at the corner. So the differences are both in what you see and how the site functions. In terms of actual metric height, again, there are differences. The 10-story option, if you're looking at the heights that would be permitted under our zoning bylaw, would be 34.35 meters, and the 13-story option would be 43.85 meters. The town zoning bylaw permits additional height for mechanical penthouses of up to 6 meters. In the 10-story option, they're taking the full 6 meters because the elevator would exit onto that top roof area. On the 13-story option, they only take the extra height for the elevator overrun, which is the equipment necessary to drag the elevator up to that height. Now, I've included comments in the staff report with respect to mezzanines, because there is a larger than normal mezzanine which is proposed within the buildings. And I have referred to that in the reports for absolute transparency. If you look at the left, this is a picture of the bottom stories of, I believe it's the east elevation. If you look towards the left-hand side of the building, you can see that the first floor is 6 meters and includes what looks like 2 stories in that area. Same height, it looks like 1 story on the other side. A mezzanine is a partial story that occupies part of the floor area. The building code regulates how much, what size of mezzanine counts as a mezzanine for their purposes, and it is different depending on whether it's open or enclosed. None of that affects the height of the building. It's the same height, whether it's enclosed or unenclosed or bigger or smaller. But the building code approaches it from the point of view of structural issues, fire issues, and such. Some of those factors are relevant for planning, but for the most part, when we're looking at these matters, we're looking at the height of the building and the physical height. It just happens to be that if the height of this building is, the first floor is 6 meters, which is necessary to accommodate both the commercial, which is higher than residential, and the entrance to the parking area, which is 6 meters in height to accommodate a garbage truck entering and dealing with garbage interior to the building, then in some areas you could fit 2 residential floors. These 2 residential floors are used for a combination of 2-story, 3-bedroom units, and the service areas for the site, which include mail, lockers, bicycle parking, and things of that nature. While I haven't addressed most of the comments which have been raised by the members of the public, other than height, I did want to specifically address shadows. The applicant had submitted a shadow study, and I have chosen to show you the slide for June 21st at 4:08 p.m. because a lot of the comments related to the use of the amenity space in adjacent apartment buildings in the afternoon. And the reason I chose this is it's between the 3 o'clock and the 5 o'clock versions of it. At 3 o'clock, shadows on all buildings, including a 4-story building, which represents the minimum that could be built, started to encroach on this area. By 5 o'clock, the shadows were covering that area. There will be some new shadows, but the difference between the various options wasn't as great as one might think. The only other difference in shadows was with respect to the public realm, the sidewalk. The 13-story option, because it has less space at that corner, casts less space or less shadows on the sidewalk. The last point I wanted to deal with was bonusing. As I had indicated earlier, there's the standard provisions of the official plan, which permit up to 6 stories without bonusing. And then there are provisions which allow for up to additional 4 stories through bonusing. This is the result of provisions of the former Section 37 of the Planning Act, which allowed for additional height or density in exchange for community benefits. These provisions were built into the official plan and essentially acknowledged that there could be some potential for additional height on the site, but it would need to be evaluated and might require some community benefits so that the entire package would be suitable. This authority expires on September 18th, 2022. and bylaws passed prior to that date can incorporate bonusing into into any approval. Bonusing is not a reason to approve an application which is not otherwise suitable for approval. But if council was interested in one of these options, it's a reason to proceed with some dispatch, just given these deadlines. So, subject to any questions that council may want to ask, that they were comfortable asking in a public forum, since this is subject to litigation, those are the comments that I wanted to make. Our recommendation is that you receive comments from the public and then deal with the confidential item. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huckworth. And for the clarity that the public may want, I will say that if council agrees with my suggestion to do this entirely in public, they'll be able to say in public which of the different options they wish to support. And so the public will know totally what goes on. And legal is fine with that. And really, the report's comprehensive. I have trouble imagining a question anybody could ask that Jennifer hasn't anticipated. So with that, Madam Clerk, would you welcome, well, I will welcome our delegations, and Madam Clerk, will you please bring on the first delegation?
The first delegation is Brian Hassett.
Mr. Hassett, while the technology brings you into the public room, let's call it, the virtual public room, I will thank you for coming and remind you to unmute yourself. There you go. Welcome.
There. Oh, I'm there. Hi, everybody. Special shout out to Councillor Austin Matthews Jr. I see. The jersey did not go unnoticed. So I just want to speak to intensification, which is something, you guys are, trying to make happen elsewhere in the city. This is a place that is supposed to a designated growth area. And I'm not for just random skyscrapers being built everywhere, but bringing in a few more people to Bronte Village is a good idea in my mind. And I believe it's the province's definition of intensification provisions says specifically, new development taking place in designated growth areas should occur adjacent to the existing built up area. And this proposed building is going to be right next to another building of identical size. So it seems to me that perfectly fits the very definition of intensification. We're all in, whether this is Bronte or Oakville or Ontario or the whole planet, we're trying to stop urban sprawl. And we're trying to condense people for, buses and reducing traffic and putting people into communities. And that's what this building would do. So I support it, as do my neighbors. And I think that needs to be pointed out, because people show up to complain. It's kind of the same thing in election. If everybody thinks are going great, people, often don't bother voting because, there's nothing, things are okay. But if they're upset about something, they'll show up and vote. And it's kind of the same thing in my experience, to these hearings. That not enough, when I talk to my neighbors, everybody around here in Bronte loves this new building and wants this new building. And just as an FYI, I'm about 2 slap shots from landing a puck in the parking lot of that building. So I'm very close to it. So I talked to the neighbors all around here who are all going to be in that shadow zone. We're all going to be the ones who are going to have to be living with this thing. And, you know, my next door neighbor here, the 1 2 down, the 1 3 down, the one that way, the one behind, they're all looking forward to this. So, you know, maybe you hear some people grousing about it, but a lot of people in Bronte Village really want to see this beautiful building go in there. So there's that. Another point is they're putting in townhouses, as you probably know, around here. And right across the street, effectively, from this proposed building, there's a little row of townhouses went in, and they all sold for $1.5 million or $1.75 million. Right across the street from that, the new proposed one, they're saying, you know, townhouses start at $2 million. And, you know, a rhetorical question to you all, but can town councilors in this town afford to buy a $2 million townhouse? You know, shouldn't we be putting in some housing that regular people, not multimillionaires, can afford to move into? You know, nothing against multimillionaires, but we ought to have some options. You know, I couldn't, when I was 25 or 35, I couldn't buy a $2 million house. And these are going to be rentals. And so we can get a diversity of a population here, as opposed to all of these new entities being sold only to multimillionaires, which sounds a bit crazy to me. And I mean, it's okay, nothing against multimillionaires, but it would be nice to have people who are not in that strata. Just one other point is, you know, we're having these meetings after meetings about whether this is going to be a 10 or a 13 or a 15. Just, you know, FYI, there's only one building next to this. And only one side of the 4 sides of that building are going to be facing this new building. And there's only 2 apartments on each floor. So this entire thing we're going through is, you know, discussing the view that either 6 or 10 apartments are going to have to turn their head a little bit to see off into the distance. So to me, it's like really inconveniencing a very small number of people. It's like they say 6 or 10 apartments in all of Bronte are really going to have their view altered, whether this is a 10 or a 15. So I think that's an important part. Oh, and the other thing, you guys, you know, is the 10 versus the 13 or 15. With the 13 or 15, the developer is putting in this gorgeous park in Bronte Village, which isn't costing town council any money. It's not costing Bronte residents any money or Oakville residents. These guys are building and giving us a park with that beautiful growing living wall right next to it. If we get the 13 or 15, it seems crazy to me to go, no, thank you. We don't want a nice, lovely new urban park right at the gateway location to Bronte Village. No, that's a bad idea. Let's crunch this down and eliminate the park. Like, that's crazy. These guys are going to be putting this park in for us and paying for it. So why the heck not allow them to go to 13 or 15 so that everybody gets a free park with a beautiful living wall? And one other thing about these architects, developers, I assume you guys have looked into them, and is that they're building a building for 50 years from now. This is going to be the most environmentally sound and futuristic and advanced and secure building in all of Bronte and quite possibly all of Oakville. All of the different provisions that they're designing into this, from geothermal to recycling water to thickness of walls and glass, are for buildings 50 or 100 years from now. And that's what they're putting in here. And so these are developers and architects who are like the good guys. They're kind of on our side. They're really working to build a building that everybody can love and that will be good for the earth. And so they're not the bad guys. And so I think that it would be, to me, it's just crazy to be opposing, fighting against, going against these people who are putting in a beautiful park, designed a beautiful building, and are wanting to work with us to make Bronte better. I sure think that we should be embracing that. So I think those are some of most of my points. That this is a positive. Oh, and by the way, for Bronte and Oakville. And just one last thing, if the developers or architects are listening in on that, you got to get rid of that. If it's going to be the 10-story, you got to get rid of that ugly industrial 4-story top on the 10-story. It doesn't fit the building. It doesn't fit the neighborhood. The 13 and the 15 do fit the Bronte design and feeling and atmosphere, as does the first 10 stories or so of that, or the first 6 stories of the new one. But then you stick this industrial complex thing on top that looks completely hideous. So if you guys are listening, get rid of that. And, you'll have me voting for this one, for even that one. So there's some stuff I reckon for you. Thanks to the IT department for getting the clock up. That really helps for us speaking from afar. And, this is just one guy out of a lot of neighbors around here who love this building and want to see this beautiful architecture come in on the corner with a park. And a lot of them don't set aside an entire night to come and speak to council. But, rest assured, I'm representing every neighbor I talk to around here is thinking the same thing. So it's not just me. So there you go. Let's go big and let's bring some people in to support the businesses and help Bronte grow, which is, I think, in everybody's best interest.
Thank you, Mr. Hassett, for your thoughts and the time you took to bring them to us. Councillor Elgar has a question, I think, for you. Councillor Elgar?
Yes, through you, Mayor Burton. Thank you very much for coming tonight. The question is, what do you want, 10, 13, or 15?
For me personally, either the 13 or 15, primarily because of the park and because the architectural design of those two buildings is so much more beautiful than the thing they've come up with for 10. And we get that beautiful.
Between 13 and 15, which one do you want?
Personally, I'd go for the 15. Because I think that, I'm friendly with a lot of the small businesses around here, and they don't get enough customers. There's not enough of a population base around here. And so if, give it 2 more stories and hopefully that's 2 more floors of very cool people who come and spend money and pay taxes and contribute to the community.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Mr. Hassett. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Shelley Thornborough.
Welcome, Ms. Thornborough. Council is looking forward to hearing from you, and we'll just wait for the... Actually, I'm not getting a shot that shows me. Okay. Normally I can see whether she's muted or not. Oh, good, perfect. Ms. Thornborough, you are unmuted. You're ready to go. We're eager to hear your information.
Thank you, Your Worship and member of council and staff. And please can I advance to the next slide? So before I go into the full presentation, sometimes a picture speaks 1,000 words. I'm asking the question, how does this imposing mixed-use building define a gateway for Bronte when we're considering the 3 options that are before council in the settlement process? This is a rendering that the Bronte Village Residents Association undertook with all of the dimensions put forward by the developer with the original proposal, which encompassed the 15 stories at a height of 50.5 meters in height. And as you can see, not taking this from a distance, really looking at a bird's eye view, you really get to see the scale and massing of this undertaking. And really, this doesn't really represent a gateway. It really represents a very imposing structure. And when you consider that there are some buildings within the area that are higher, their settings are in a sort of more park-like setting with a bigger footprint, and as a result, those are very different to compare on a comparative basis. So if we can go to the next slide, please. One of the key things as our board and as our members and community have brought forward is considering these three key areas when looking at all of the development plans, and in this particular case, what our recommendation is to council for the options before us. Understanding the livable Oakville plan and the zoning, and that this has been a process that's been developed over time, deploying much of the tax base and utilizing a lot of input. Much of this we hope that will be refined and improved from a transparency standpoint over time. But it's really key that the community is very much a part of a top-down, bottom-up approach. The other issue is looking at the character of the Bronte Village. No one here is opposed to growth. No one is opposed to revitalization or development, but we do stand for balanced growth that is respective of our legislation and our planning process, and also takes into consideration the vitality of our community and the stability of our residential neighborhoods. And the final thing is to consider the precedent. When you have applications going forward with what we can only call as super bonusing, it really sets the tone for what is to come further down. And we know that Ward 1 and Bronte as a whole is still set for more growth. It has taken on considerable growth as it stands, and much of that occupancy is still unfolding at the former Bronte Village Mall. So there are lots of people coming in, and there's more planned growth that's happening. We just need to be very careful of creating such a focal point and at some of these particular areas or development sites. Next slide, please. So if you look at this key application, you can see that a lot of the boxes really don't meet in terms of the original application and two of the options for, which include the 13 stories. There is no adherence to the current zoning, taking it beyond that of what was even proposed in the Bronte Village area growth review. There's an increase in stories, height, and a decrease in parking. Next slide, please. We've done a further analysis of the proposals in comparative to the current zoning. And I think this was pointed out before, that the residential units have remained ostensibly very much comparable for all of the options. And this is being achieved by some of the design modifications for the 10-story, obviously curtailing the urban square, which we can see is removed, and also increasing the retail area. So for that purpose, the developer has managed to quite creatively come up with a solution to meet their needs and at the same time adhere to our legislation and current zoning. So we asked council, why would we consider providing height in addition to this if there is going to be impacts to the public realm of our community, increased trafficking, etc. Next slide, please. In addition to the concerns around the legislation process, it's the key community concerns and issues, and these should never be forgotten when we're considering all of the options. And even though I recognize the slide that was presented in terms of the shadowing at 4:08 p.m., you will note that the shadowing that is cast on the Oscar building is quite extensive. And as a result, there are a lot more than 10 apartments actually affected. There are 88 senior residence apartments that are affected by the application proposal at 15 stories. So we also have a change in character with, a redefined understanding of what a gateway is with this imposing structure. We are already experiencing increased traffic and gridlock and predatory towing. So we will be experiencing more of those issues, particularly with the aspirational goals of the developer, reducing parking consideration. And really reducing some of the safety, not just within the construction period, but also thereafter with reduced sight lines for both pedestrians and for cyclists along that particular intersection. The other thing that we are concerned about is the effects of construction through the process where there is the potential for noise and dust, as well as the excavation process for the surrounding area when bedrock is at 6 meters, when you consider that the developer will probably excavate to at least a minimum of 12 meters in depth. Next slide, please. We respectfully ask that council considers no more than that outlined in the Livable Oakville Plan, which might include the addition of bonusing up of 4 to a maximum of 10 stories. If bonusing is rewarded, we ask for a capital injection towards the restoration of Bronte Beach, with a focus on improving quality of water, restoration of the washrooms and recreational amenities, and improving the public access and realm. So with that, I'm going to reiterate on behalf of the board and our community and members, our recommendation comes forth that council supports no more than 10 stories and keeps within the Livable Oakville Plan, not setting a precedent for super bonusing within our area, and respecting the planning and legislation process as it is. We have received over 300 delegations or input from both our members and community over a very extended period, because this application predates to when this was a SIMGIM application. And as a result, we have really taken a lot of that input from our community and been able to distill it in the presentation here before you tonight. So with that, we respectfully advocate for no more than 10 to preserve the character of Bronte. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thornborough, for your time and your information. Councillor O'Meara, do you have a question for the delegation?
I do, yes, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Shelley, for delegating tonight. I know I did recall in your letter as well a request to have site plan brought to council for input as well, and that's still something that the BVRA would like to see.
Absolutely, Councillor O'Meara. Given the concerns that we have, particularly through the construction period, we resoundingly call for the site plan before council in public realm.
Perfect. I'm sure we can make that happen. And just as an aside, I'm happy to share with you the phase 2 work that we're going to be doing at Bronte Beach as well, because it might take a lot of some of your requests for where the bonus is going, and we've already got a lot of that planned. So happy to share that with you, and we, Councillor Robertson and I, will absolutely ensure that site plan comes back to council so everybody can get a good view at it and have a say in it. So thank you very much for your delegation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Lee Wilkening.
I don't know why I no longer see the view I want. Oh, there it is. Ms. Wilkening, welcome. Please unmute yourself and share your information.
Thank you, Worship. Good evening, councillors, staff, and neighbors. Can you hear me okay?
You're being heard perfectly.
Awesome. My name is Leah Wilkening, and I am a settler living on West River Street to the immediate west of the mouth of Bronte Creek. I begin by thanking you for the privilege to delegate and acknowledge that I speak from Treaty 22 land and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Bronte Village is not included in the treaty that concerns the majority of Oakville. Treaty 22 specifically covers the mouth of Bronte Creek to Lake Ontario and surrounding land. This includes the property that is being delegated today. According to their website, the Mississaugas shared their rights under the duress of starvation in exchange for learning the basic tenets of the Christian faith and education for their children. In exchange for this land, they maintain the legal right to continuing shared stewardship. It grieves me to say, I can't imagine the original signers of the treaty had any reasonable expectation that the residential schools that began within the next decade of its signing would be just consideration for this exchange. My concerns about the development on East Street have been around the consultative process, especially that it upholds the charter rights of residents to have a substantive say in how their communities are developed, and that land rights are upheld. Given time and political constraints from the province, I ask the esteemed councillors to vote for the 10-story design, as I think it best honors the consultative process already in place with the Livable Oakville Plan. I challenge the claim that this development is functionally affordable housing, or that higher population will guarantee better outcomes for local business. In my previous employment with ShopperTrack, a global leader in customer traffic research and national retail sales data, I learned that customer foot traffic is not predictive of increased sales nor tax dollars. Our businesses are healthiest when they offer the service and products their customers want at the time they need for the price they're willing to pay. A process that is also done best in consultation with the community. Like you, I would like to see our community grow, not only in population, but belonging to one another. This takes time and thoughtfulness. To this end, I agree with other delegates who've asked that bonusing remain in Bronte so that we may invest in the community spaces that enfold our new neighbors, honor the previous generations, and protect its natural assets for the future. While I have the floor, I ask you respectfully, in future planning reviews with developers and deliberations with the province that you will undertake and that you will discuss probably after this time in camera, I ask you respectfully to take seriously Council's commitment to honor the treaties of this land. I encourage you to continue to use your political voice to advocate for the constructive, transparent consultation of the Mississaugas of the Credit and Bronte residents alike. We have yet to see how recent large-scale development upstream and in Bronte Village will affect the sacred watershed of Treaty 22 territory beyond theoretical estimation of town planners. I hope we have a common vision to steward this land and waters for the benefit of the next generations of all peoples in a spirit of conciliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkening, for your information and the time you took to bring it. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation, please?
Next delegation is Harry Shaw.
Mr. Shea, welcome. Council is looking forward to seeing you and hearing you. And I'm sure eventually the technology will surface you here. Mr. Shea, you just need to unmute, and then I believe we probably will be able to hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Town Council. My name is Harry Shea, and I'm a resident of the Lighthouse. As I've stated previously on numerous occasions, I support the Livable Oakville Plan and the Bronte Village Growth Review. I was very pleased to read that Town Council has an opportunity this evening to vote on a 10-story application for this, a 10-story option for this development application. I respectfully ask that Town Council vote for this 10-story option. By voting for this option, the MU1 zoning, which allows 4 to 6 stories and bonusing up to 10, is respected. Second, last October, when I delegated regarding this application, I spoke to the concerns around construction. Those issues I spoke to included managing traffic at the intersection of East Street and Lakeshore Road, construction parking, including the location of the construction trailer, concerns over children in the area walking to school, and dust and noise mitigation. Tonight, I respectfully ask that the Town Council consider that site plan be presented by staff in a Planning and Development Council meeting, making the site plan for this development open to the public. And finally, I ask that the monies from the bonusing stay in Bronte. Specifically, I'd like to see the monies applied for the restoration of Bronte Beach. And I thank you for this opportunity to speak to this development application tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Shea, for your thoughts, and Council appreciates the brevity with which you presented them. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Linda Sinelli.
Welcome, Ms. Sinelli. I believe we can hear you. You did unmute yourself, so please begin.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of Town Council. My name is Linda Sinelli, and I am a long-term owner and resident of Bronte Village. I support the Livable Oakville Plan. I appreciate that the developer has put forward a 10-story plan that falls within the LOP and respectfully request that town council vote for this option that allows 4 to 6 stories with possible bonusing of up to 10 stories. Bronte Village is a pocket community in the town of Oakville with unique and special qualities. It is a place for the youngest member to thrive and grow, to the oldest member to age in place, and everything in between. The community strives to live up to the LOP mission statement 2.1. And I say, to enhance the town's natural, cultural, social, economic environments by ensuring that environmental stability, sustainability, cultural vibrancy, economic prosperity, and social well-being are incorporated into growth and development decisions. In keeping with this mission statement, I request that the monies from the bonusing stay within Bronte and enhance our community. A great place, in my opinion, would be for the restoration of Bronte Beach. I thank you for the opportunity for speaking.
Thank you, Ms. Sinelli, for your information. Council appreciates hearing from you. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
Next delegation is Lindsay Thomas.
Ms. Thomas, we see you. If you unmute yourself, I believe we'll be able to hear you. And please, there you go. Please begin.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, town councilors and staff, as well as members of the community. My name is Lindsay Thomas, and I live in Bronte Village. I'm speaking this evening to provide input for the settlement offers at the 77 East Street development. Next slide. Bronte Village is a place where the residents know their neighbors. As the Livable Oakville Plan states, Bronte has the character of a village community, and the town wishes to nurture, conserve, and enhance that character. Next slide, please. The Livable Oakville Plan's mission is to ensure that environmental sustainability, cultural vibrancy, economic prosperity, and social well-being are incorporated into growth and development decisions. It also states that 10 stories, including possible acceptable bonusing, is the maximum allowable height for the properties included at the development. Next slide, please. Although the proposed 10-story option is severely lacking in style and thought, I hope that the town will support the Livable Oakville Plan and minimize the negative impact on the immediate community by voting for 10 stories. Next slide, please. As for the community benefit, I wish for the town to keep funds for the permitted bonusing within Bronte Village by investing in the harbor, specifically Bronte Beach. This is an area that could use the support of the first half of the Livable Oakville Plan's mission statement, which is to enhance the natural, cultural, social, and economic environment, all while preserving its natural habitats and beauty. Next slide, please. Bronte's culture is its connection to nature, and especially water, as it was born a fishing village. Bronte has a distinct heritage and has become a welcoming community for every demographic. Let's strive to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas, for your information and bringing it to us. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
Next delegation is Martin Mentes.
Welcome, Mr. Menchis. If you unmute yourself, I believe we'll be able to hear you. Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor Burton.
We've got you now. Please begin. Thank you for
Thank you,
coming.
Mayor Burton, and good evening, Mayor Burton, town councillors, staff members, as well as members of the community. As mentioned, my name is Martin Manches, and I'm a resident of the Lighthouse, which is adjacent to the proposed development. I thank you for this evening being able to provide comment with regard to the two options which have been placed forward to us by council with regard to a 10-story and a 13-story. And as we've seen in the initial presentation, which was so eloquently presented, that they are different designs. And I just want to point out again that although they are different designs, that the heights and different heights, the occupancy or the number of units remain the same. So going higher doesn't mean you're going to get more tenants and more people to stay there. Could I have next slide, please? I wish to just provide some comments, and I'm going to cut short the next two slides because they've already been addressed. The proposed site plans on the ground level for the three project versions are very similar as I look at them, except that the 10-story version provides more retail space at that corner of East Street and Lakeshore, which to me is a good idea. I was going to talk to the height, and Mayor Burton and Councillor O'Meara, I know we've discussed this many times, and there's no clear definition of the height versus stories, but it was already been presented, and my question was related to the mezzanine level, and that has been addressed. So I'm going to skip this slide and the next slide, if we can go on to the final slide, please. So again, in conclusion, I fully support the livable Oakville plan, which guides future growth and change in the town. I also support very much so the council proposal for the 10-story option and would request the consideration of the statement of mezzanine, but that's already been addressed, so that doesn't need to be looked at anymore. Additionally, in my delegation, as Harry Shea was saying, in October, we raised concerns related to the safety of pedestrians and other construction-related activities. And I'm aware, Mayor Burton and Councillor O'Meara, that you said that these would be addressed at site plan stage. So I also respectfully request that the site plan be presented by staff in a future planning and development council meeting for public view and input. So thank you very much for this opportunity afforded to me to present my statement to the meeting today. And once again, I support the 10-story option.
Thank you, Mr. Menges, for your time and your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Jonathan McNeese, and he's also going to be speaking on behalf of Donovan Cox.
Hello. Mr. McNeese,
Hi,
we
everyone.
see you and we hear you. Thank you very much. And you have the floor.
Great. I'll speak on behalf of myself first, and then I can go on to Donovan. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, staff, community members, and the applicants. My name is Jonathan McNeese. I am here today to talk about proposed development at the southeast corner of Lakeshore Road West and East Street. I delegated at the first meeting. I've been engaged in the consultation throughout the process. I have over 15 years experience in planning, design, and creating healthy, balanced communities, and have worked on over 100 projects around the world. Additionally, I am a property owner at the Lighthouse and have been raised in Bronte and property owner for over 15 years. I'll try not to repeat too much that has been said already, but I'll also try to offer a few tidbits that I've seen work in other places that could potentially make this even better. So as mentioned, based on the statistics provided, we're essentially seeing three versions of the same thing. If you look at density or parking or even some safety concerns and potentially shadowing might even get worse with the lower density. But as mentioned, and you're aware through Ms. Huckwith as well, that we're kind of seeing three versions of the same thing, only height has really been addressed. So I would urge you to continue to negotiate, follow the advice of the legal department's report, saying that changes to some of these numbers may be achievable through further negotiations or required as a result of detailed design. That's a quote from the staff report. So I urge you to continue to talk to get the best possible settlement for the community and all stakeholders involved. I'd also take into consideration that planning staff likely has a near finalized report, which is probably discussed in the confidential section. And I'm sure they've received comment through circulation and seeing we haven't had the benefit of that report coming forward in a public meeting, that it would be great to listen to their advice as well. So the third point I wanted to make is just around the vibrant retail environment. And Leah had some good points with her retail expertise. So I would agree that a critical element that seems to be overlooked in the current proposal at 10 stories, or even some of the other ones, is ensuring that the retail is vibrant, especially at the pedestrian level. This is where the vast majority of people will interact with this building, and it's where it takes the character of the village of Bronte. And I think this is something that's a win-win for both the community and the developer. So I would strongly encourage a pedestrian level work group with the applicant that includes as many voices as possible. So the community, the businesses, youth, seniors, and the list goes on. And again, just focus on creating that best possible retail environment. I realize this would be voluntary from the applicants, but I think they've demonstrated a willingness for feedback, and a very focused workshop could be fruitful for everybody. The final point I'd like to make is just around community benefits. So I agree with everyone else. I would suggest potential implementation of community benefits could be through a Bronte placemaking fund. This could be community driven, decisions could be made at the community level. It could go towards such initiatives that have been mentioned, such as the Bronte Beach improvements. But there was also some great work that was started through 880 cities through the Bronte Forward Plan. And that's really just the beginning, creating that plan and that consultation they did. We really need some ways of taking action. So let's not lose the momentum with that. A fund like that could also be topped up through other bonusing endeavors. We certainly know there's other applications on the way. And even community grants, if it's set up properly, they could seek funding that could be leveraged, or even there may be businesses that want to sponsor certain things. So having that sort of placemaking community fund, I call it, for Bronte, I think would be a great structure to think about as to how to implement the bonusing funds and create a pathway going forward. And I think it would really help knit the community together and help Bronte maintain its character and identity. So finally, I would just say my recommendation is, well, while it's unfortunate, I realize that current provincial planning system puts municipalities in this precarious position where policies and plans cannot be fully enforced in many instances. I do think we need to take a stand on height and enforce the Livable Oakville Plan height restriction of 10 stories with bonusing on the site, while continuing to work with the province and to give municipalities more power to make decisions at the community level. Therefore, my recommendation is that when it goes to council in full, that the 10-story proposal be chosen. However, consider what further can be done to this proposal to address many of the items and concerns that you've heard about that are not currently addressed. And as mentioned, even looking at the shadowing that have been provided at the 10-story level, there's certain areas that you actually get more shadowing. So that has not been minimized either. Typically, the litmus test in situations like this is what is good planning. However, it becomes cloudy in situations like we're in now. So I would say that the decision in this situation is how do we get the best possible compromise? What will set the best precedent for Bronte to avoid opening the floodgates and having more aggressive development applications come forward. Further down Lakeshore Road in Burlington, you see they're getting applications for 30 and 35 stories along their waterfront. So I don't think we want to open up the kind of Pandora's box for height. I think we really need to enforce height on sites like this. And then the final question I would say is sort of the litmus test is what can we learn from this process? And throughout this, have we discovered any kind of areas of our plans and Bronte plans that can be approved for the next time we're in this situation? So I thank you all for your time and consideration in this very important decision for Bronte's future. And I can take a pause and I switch over to Donovan's voice. Unless there's any questions, I will pull up Donovan's. All right. So now speaking for Donovan Cox, good evening, Your Worship, Town Council, staff, and members of the community. My name is Donovan Cox, a longtime resident of Oakville and homeowner in Bronte Village. I am part of Bronte Village's consensus view that development is a good thing within the constraints of the Livable Oakville Plan, the Bronte Growth Area Review. Regarding the settlement offer that Council will be considering this evening, respectfully, I urge Council to vote for the 10-story option in line with our MU1 zoning bylaw and bonusing provisions. When I delegated last October, I was concerned with the impact of large developments like East Street on Bronte Village's historic waterfront character. I would like to propose that any revenues from bonusing should be directed towards the enhancement of the natural cultural surroundings, including Bronte Beach. Last October, I spoke with reference to the Next Trans Transportation Impact Study provided by Podium. It proposed that a reduction in parking on the East Street development was somehow good for Bronte, ! But the reality is the 10+% reduction in residential parking spaces that are being overlooked in this development will have to be found elsewhere in Bronte Village and presumably paid for by the community. So it is disappointing that neither the 10 nor 13-story option has addressed this problem, particularly since it is a longstanding concern among residents. Respectfully, I am highlighting this point since the East Street development is but one among many active developments within the study area, which will add over 2,200 new residents in the near term. If the reduction in parking at East Street sets the precedent across residential developments, a larger scale parking solution will be required by the end of the decade. Otherwise, predatory towing practices will again become commonplace. Thank you for the opportunity to delegate this evening. Your consideration is appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. McNeese, for your thoughts and those of Mr. Cox. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The last listed delegation is Ian Andres with Goodmans and Christian Huggett with Podium Developments.
Welcome, Mr. Andres and Mr. Huggett. I see you've successfully unmuted, so we should be able to hear you just fine, and we're looking forward to your information too.
Great. Thank you very much. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Ian Andres. I'm a lawyer with Goodmans, and I'm here with Christian Huggett.
Mr. Andres, I made a mistake when I said that I thought we'd be able to hear you. You're kind of faint. Is your microphone covered or near you?
Does that one sound better, Your Worship?
Now you're better, thank you.
Is that better? Great, okay. Thank you. Again, my name is Ian Andres. I'm a lawyer with Goodmans. I'm here with Christian Huggett, who's the Vice President of Development for Podium Developments. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear tonight. As you've heard already, an application was originally submitted last summer proposing a 15-story mixed-use building with 245 residential units and commercial space at grade, along with a public open space element at the corner. That proposal is currently before the Ontario Land Tribunal on appeal, and our team continues to believe that it represents architectural excellence and an appropriate built form within this local planning context, consistent with the heights of surrounding buildings and other recent approvals. But having said that, we recognize that building height is a sensitive issue amongst some in the community, and that reasonable people can disagree about how tall this building should be or about what the applicable planning policies should support in this location. And we acknowledge, of course, that the Livable Oakville Plan currently contemplates a building of up to 10 stories on the property. We've applied to amend that height limit because we believe a taller building is justified, but we also understand that there are others that prefer to maintain the existing 10-story limit, as many of the speakers have just articulated. Above all, Podium Developments is eager to move ahead with this development in order to bring much needed housing to market as soon as possible. And having considered the feedback received to date from members of the public, from town staff, and from councillors, our team has reflected on the proposal, and we asked the project architect to study whether a similar amount of housing might be deliverable in a building with a lower overall height. So that process culminated in the creation of two alternative options, which are before you today, one at 13 stories, one at 10 stories. Each of those two options does have less residential floor area than the original proposal did, but a similar number of overall dwelling units and parking spaces. We have examined each option carefully. We're here today to confirm that the applicant is willing to move forward with either alternative option if town council is willing to confirm its support for either or both of the alternative options. We believe both alternatives would result in appropriate redevelopment for the site. And even though there may be some preference on our team for the built form and massing of the 15-story option, Podium would rather spend its resources moving forward with a compromised mixed-use development than proceeding with a contested hearing on the original application, which likely wouldn't be scheduled for some time. So since these applications are still before the tribunal and these settlement options are being disclosed on a without prejudice basis, notwithstanding that we're in public session here, I think I'll leave it at that for today. But I would like to thank Ms. Hugtwith and town staff for their cooperation as we've discussed the potential alternative development scenarios over the past couple of months. And Mr. Mayor, members of council, I would like to thank you as well for your attention and your willingness to consider a potential settlement of these appeals. So I'll turn it over briefly to Mr. Huggett in case he wants to add anything. And we're both here and available to answer any questions you may have, recognizing that there may be only so much we can say publicly about the alternative options at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would just echo the comments Mr. Andres put forward. We are very interested and excited to become a cooperator and city builder within this site and within Oakville, of course. We have listened very carefully. We believe we put forward two compelling options, notwithstanding, as Mr. Andres said, our original proposal. We believe that the two versions we put forward today are quite receptive to most comments we've heard to date. And I appreciate all the feedback we've heard to date from community, both today and through the process, as well as city staff and council. So we are at your disposal today within whatever we're able to answer for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the time you took and for your information and your ready spirit of cooperation. I see no questions for you, so thank you very much. I'm gonna, oh wait, I now have a question. No, I don't have a question for you. Thank you. I think we're gonna make a decision. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to all the delegates who came tonight. I do want to thank yourself, Mayor Burton, and Councillor Robertson for really pushing hard to ask the applicants to bring forward a settlement application through staff to council. It's the first time in my 8 years I've seen this happen, and I do thank them for their willingness to do this publicly, which is not normally how it goes, but you know, we've Councillor Robertson and I have been through a few settlement discussions where transparency and openness is lacking, not due to anything that this council does, but I think it's I think the willingness and the demonstration that Christian and his team has put forward, including doing the shadow studying and posting that, which they didn't need to do, as well as has helped sort of pull some things back. And Mayor Burton, I do agree with you as well that Councillor Robertson and I discussed, again, not going into closed session and putting a motion forward publicly on this, because I think, again, it adds to the transparency, and we're appreciative of that, certainly. So with that, Your Worship, I would like to move the option to move forward with discussions on a 10-story application, knowing full well that that staff still need to work out the details. So I don't know whether that's option A that staff would get, or maybe some direction from yourself. If you think there's a better way to word that motion or direction, I'd be happy to hear you out there.
Okay, thank you. I understand what you want to do. If you or Councillor Robertson would like to give us the motion that the comments from the public related to the development options provided through the settlement offer be received prior to council making a decision with respect to the offer through the related confidential report, we could take step one towards a decision. Councillor Robertson, thank you for the motion. Is there any objection to the motion? There being none seen, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, one of you also needs to move the following, and if I misunderstood you, correct me immediately. That council authorizes staff to, so this is the 10-story option, which I hear you to be wanting to move. So the motion is that staff be authorized to negotiate and finalize a settlement of the appeal based on the 10-story option, subject to the issues identified in the confidential report from the legal department, being resolved to the satisfaction of the commissioner and the town solicitor, and that the site plan be brought to council for final approval. Did I capture all your wishes?
That's exactly the way I wrote it, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay. Now I took a second to look at the legal team in the room, and they had no consternation. So I guess that means about the site plan coming to council. So I'm taking that to mean that because we're doing it before the 1st of July, when the ability to do that disappears, there's another timely reason to be doing the decision tonight rather than deferring it for another time. If that is your motion, and it is, just the clerk will want to know which of you is moving it. Is that you this time, Councilor O'Meara? All right. Then I will ask if there's any opposition to this motion. Madam Clerk, there is no apparent opposition. I declare the motion carried unanimously. So thank you, everybody. The next item on our agenda tonight is the advisory committee minutes from the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee. And there are a number of recommendations from the committee as listed in the agenda. So the motion is to approve the recommendations and to receive the remainder of the minutes. Is there someone who'd like to make that motion? Councillor Adams, thank you. Is there any objection to that motion? There being none, that motion carries. Thank you, everyone. It would now be in order for a motion to rise and report to council. Councillor Duddick, thank you. Any objection? There being none, that motion carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and confidential consent item 5.1, public hearing items 6.1 and 6.2, discussion items 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3, confidential discussion item 8.1, and advisory committee minutes, item 9.1, as noted by the clerk. A mover and seconder for this report would be in order now. Councillor Knoll and Councillor Longo, thank you. Any objection to the motion? There being none, the motion carries and the report is adopted. Thank you, everybody. Does anybody have new business of an emergency, condolence, or congratulatory nature? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to let everybody in television land know and remind my colleagues on council that this is Emergency Preparedness Week. Emergency Preparedness Week runs from May 1st to May 7th, and there's a bevy of resources available on the internet. Those of us who are regional council know that we have a number of staff members that are happy to provide advice and information on this. The most important thing about Emergency Preparedness Week is to know the 3 steps. Step 1 is know the risks. 2 is make a plan, and 3 is to get a kit, and the kit is to be for 72 hours to be able to protect yourself and your family at home. So become aware of emergency preparedness. This is the great week to do it, and I encourage everybody on council to share that information in your newsletters. And there's some terrific resources, like I said, on the region's website, as well as the federal government and the provinces. So happy Emergency Preparedness Week, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to wish all of our residents here in Oakville and Halton Eid Mubarak, and I hope that everyone, on behalf of council, everyone is enjoying their celebrations. This is probably the first time after a long time that families and friends are able to get together in person and really fully enjoy the celebration. So best wishes to everyone.
It's perhaps the happiest Eid al-Fitr in years, at least 2 years. So thank you, Councillor Palmer, for that. Now, Council, we need to add to the calendar a planning and development meeting. And it would be terrific if we could do it here tonight. To do that, we need a mover and seconder to waive the procedure against introducing something new. Councillor Haslett-Thiel and Councillor Lischina, thank you. Any objection? There's no objection, so that carries. And now we need a mover and seconder to add the extra Planning and Development Council meeting And I believe that we need to reconsider our decision of April 25th to add an additional Planning and Development Council meeting for June 21st at 6:30 PM and schedule the additional Planning and Development Council meeting for June 27th, 2022 in its place. I need a mover and seconder. Councillor Grant, thank you. Councillor Palmer, thank you. Any objection? There being none, that carries, and the meeting is changed to increase the convenience of everyone. It would now be in order for a mover and seconder for the consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Giddings, thank you. Any objection? There being no objection, sorry.
We need to, all the bylaws except for that first one.
Oh, yes. Yes. So just for clarity, everybody understands that we withdrew item 4.2, and that means that the bylaw listed in the agenda, bylaw 2022-025, is not being passed tonight. With that clarification, any opposed? None being seen, the bylaws are considered and read. Thank you, everybody. That completes the work of this meeting. Thank you for your time and attention and your good decisions. It's been terrific working with you. See you next time. Good night.